Hello and welcome to the Motorica Masters 2026 competition. First of all, I want to say congratulations for being accepted onto the competition, and we're really excited to see what you can make with Motorica's tools. Now, this competition is themed around living worlds, and by living worlds we mean worlds that have NPCs, characters walking around that look lively, and they're brought to life via animation inside Motorica, or generated with Motorica, should I say. So all the characters in the world would be Motorica animated. You'd be able to go around through the world and just spectate. The world happens and operates around you, and you can just render out a video to show how the world looks as a spectator. But we're not just going to send you in blind. We do have a few resources that we can give you to help you with this project. In fact, we highly recommend that you stick to these resources and stay within them, because it's going to end up saving you a lot of time. So the first resource that we have is the sample project. This is our internal Unreal Engine sample project that we're going to slowly roll out to be more public facing. But right now that it's set up that you have a player map and an NPC map. So for this competition, you'll be focusing on the NPC map. In that NPC map, we have NPCs that can walk, that can wander, they can patrol, they can stand still, they have idle breaks, different animation types, just to show you how you can start putting NPCs around a map. And the idea is you would use the same framework, generate new animations in Motorica, and then populate your maps and your worlds with these same kind of characters. The second resource that we're going to give you is full access to Motion Stage and Motion Factory. And we'll give you a preset trail set, which allows you to have a template for the animations that you need to generate for the NPCs, which you can then drop straight into Unreal Engine using our plugin. And I'll show that whole process in a bit. And the third thing, or rather the things you could use, are any assets that you have the rights to use. So free marketplace assets, your assets, assets that you've bought, anything that you have the rights to use, you're free to use in this competition to make your submission look better. So the first thing that I'll go through is the Unreal Engine project, because there's a lot to go through there. So if we switch to Unreal Engine, then we'll see that we have our project. Now, I'm going to press 1 just so we can see the sky view. This is the project, and this is essentially our sandbox for testing things out inside Unreal Engine. If you were to click play when you go into the project, you're going to be greeted by this character, which is running around. But this is our player locomotion. But this isn't the focus of our competition. What is the focus of our competition is the NPC locomotion and the NPCs in general. So you'll see that in this maps folder, we have this map called Level NPC Arena. If you go into this map, you'll then be able to see the NPCs inside the map and the structure of the map. It's a copy of the single player one, but it's just got some NPCs in here. We've got a bunch in here that are set to wandering. We've got some patrol paths, and these ones are set to patrolling. We've got this one to show how retargeting works. We've got a nav mesh blocker, so these guys can't escape out of here. But if you click play, then you'll see we have a spectator camera. So it's got a bit of a camera lag, just so you can render out some nice videos without having to kind of really slowly press the joystick. But this is me controlling it with a mouse, and I'm walking around. I can press E to go into flying mode, or sorry, R to go into flying mode. I can press R again to go back to the ground. I can press E to zoom in, Q to zoom out, and I also press Shift to go quickly. So this is how you'll be able to kind of walk around in the map and render out these videos. You can also add some improvements to this spectator camera if you would like, but it's very configurable. There are a lot of settings in the blueprint, and those will be documented as well. So inside the project, we have many different controls that you can use to customize each character inside your living world. And there are two categories of these controls. There's the profiles, and the profiles are usable across many different instances of the character inside the world. And there's per instance settings which can be used to control a specific instance of an NPC. So if we switch over to Unreal, we can see that this character, if I click on them, we're going to get some controls on the right hand side, and all the controls that you really need are under this Motorica category. So the first one is the default AI state. There's 3 options: static, wandering, and patrolling, and I'll show you each one of those in action. So if we go to static and we click simulate, you'll see that it's very much just standing still. The character's going to do some idle breaks, but ultimately they're not going to move anywhere. They're just standing around, and you have an array of idle breaks inside the animation profile, which I'll show in a bit, that dictate what animation is going to do here. The second option is wandering. So if we stop and go for wandering, then you'll see that she starts to move around. Now, this is controlled with a wandering range, which we have set up here. So you can see the wandering range is between 400 and 700 units. So the character's just gonna walk somewhere within this range, stand there for a bit, and then walk somewhere else. It's very simple movement. And we do have a wandering delay configurable somewhere, which I'll show in a bit. And that just dictates how much, or how long, sorry, the character stands still for in the idle state. Next, we have the patrolling state. And this is paired with a patrol path. And a patrol path is this actor, which is a child of the spline control. But if we go here, we can go into blueprint, AI, patrol, and we see the patrol spline. And I want to create a patrol spline for this character. So we already have a few in the world, but I'll show you how you can create a fresh one. I'll just delete this one. So we can get this area over here. We drag it in, and this is what it looks like initially. I'll actually move it closer to this NPC, just so she can get there quicker. Rotate it so it's facing this way. This is the first control, and I can move that wherever I want. And we'll see that each one of these gizmos will snap to the locations of the waypoints as soon as we finish dragging. Now, if I want to add another waypoint, I can right click on the spline, add a point here, and then move that around. So now we're going to have an NPC that is, I should go into simulate mode rather. And I do need to also assign the spline. So patrol path, BP patrol spline is this one. I want my new one, so I can click the eyedropper tool and then click my patrol spline. And now she's going to walk over there. So she walks over to this point, stands there for a bit, and then will walk to the next point. And then stands there for a bit. And note how she rotates to face the next point. That's a very interesting mechanic, which is configurable. So she's just walking there to and from. And then once she gets there, she'll keep going back. So just ping pong between the states, between the waypoints. But if I don't want her to rotate every time, then what I can do is on the patrol spline, we have the option to make it a rotational spline or not. So the reason that the NPC was always facing these arrows is because we've dictated what rotation to have on each gizmo. With the spline point rotation, I can just rotate the spline point and you'll see that will change that. But I can also make it so it's not a rotational spline. If I do that, and then we simulate again the same way, you'll see that she walks there, but at this next one, after she stops, she's not going to rotate to a specific rotation. Just stands in the same direction. So that's the spline control. And note, the spline control isn't like a path that they're going to follow. It's just waypoints. So you see how the spline curves here. It's always just a straight line. It's not a straight line. It's using nav. So if there was an object in the middle or an obstacle or another character even, then the NPC would walk around them. But these splines are kind of just visual to give you a sense of what the patrol path could look like without the curving aspect. So that's that. We also have another control on the character, which is the move speed variance. So if I change this, this is basically going to dictate which boundaries of movement speed that we can apply to a character. So every time the character walks, it's taking the base speed and then saying, I can go 12.5% this way, 12.5% this way, and just pick a random speed in between. So we can increase that or decrease that to give a bit more variance to the movement. But of course, if you go too far away from the speed of your animations, you might start to see some glitches. So just be careful with that setting there. So those are the per instance settings. But now we can go and talk about the profiles. Because as I mentioned, we have profiles for wider scale changes and then per instance settings for individual changes. So in here, we've got some profiles. I'm going to search profile. We've got the animation profile and the movement profile. First, we'll look at the animation profile. The animation profile has a few options here. The first one is the proxy table. So what we're doing here is we use a chooser system that uses proxy tables because we don't want to set up an individual chooser table for each character. We just want to set up a master chooser table and then proxies so we can point the chooser to the right assets for each different character. And the way that we do this is with the animation profiles. So the proxy table, I can go in here, and this is essentially just an assignment of proxy assets to real assets. This is covering all the different gates that a character could move in. This is really taking it from our player locomotion framework and applying it to the NPCs. So we've got our idle proxy is our idle table, and our walking proxy is our walking table. Now, if this NPC could run, then we'd have our running one, and we'd have our run to walk and our walk to run. Because this is only 2 gates, we just have these 2 tables. So that's the proxy, and I'll show you how we can set one of those up for our own assets later on in this tutorial. Next is the idle break array. This is going to dictate which idle breaks are playing during the idle state. Now there's 2 types of idle breaks. We have additive idle breaks and we have full body idle breaks. So additive idle breaks are going to be used additively, and full body idle breaks are going to be blended to and from as we play. So it's just a slightly different way of playing the idle break. The idea behind that is you might not have perfect pose matching on the idle breaks depending on where they come from. So you have the additive setup as a fallback, but the ideal setup is of course playing a full body idle break, which we do have for this character. So we've got some idle breaks here, for example, this look backwards animation. Very simple idle break, and this is part of this array. And inside the array, you can also dictate the weight. So they're played with a probability. We play an idle break, and then we wait a bit, and then we play another idle break. But the probability of picking an idle break is dictated by this weight, higher probability. So for something like looking backwards, which is something you don't want to do every single time you do an idle break, then you might want to give that a lower weight like we have here. But another way to control how that plays, or rather doesn't play, is via the cooldown. Because we can also say, I want to make sure that after I've played this idle break, 2 more idle breaks have to happen before this one can play again. That's what the cooldown states, and that's how we do the idle breaks. So that's the animation profile. We can go back here now to look at the movement profile. And the movement profile, it just has one thing in here, which is a map of gates. So we can we can add a gate if we want to, but we're just sticking with walking for most of these characters. If you want some NPCs that can jog and walk and transition, that is possible, but that's a bit more of a complex setup. We just have the 1 gate case here for these characters. So we can say the speed of the character, and for NPCs, it's good to keep the min and max the same. We have the half-lives, which are going to dictate how quickly the character accelerates and decelerates. And the rotation half-lives are dictating how fast they rotate. So a higher number means slower rotations or accelerations, and a lower number means faster. We have the breaking half-life scalar, which is just a tunable value. Essentially, if you think the character's not slowing down fast enough when they come to an idle, you can increase this or decrease this as you wish. It's just up to you. Strafing is enabled, but it's kind of only really used in very specific situations. But the main controls that you care about here are the speeds and the half-lives, because those need to be matched up with the movement system that we use in Motorica to generate the animations. So that's the movement profile. And the third profile, which isn't on this character because this isn't a retargeting, it's not an instance of the retargeter one, but this is an instance of the retargeted NPC. And we have this extra profile, which is the retargeting profile. So of course, this is going to be probably quite interesting for you if you're not using characters that just use the default Unreal Engine mannequin skeleton and proportions. So we can use the retargeting profile to dictate the IK retargeter that we're going to use for this character. This one is a very simple Mani to Motorica one. So it might seem a bit counterintuitive going from Motorica to Mani and back to Motorica, but this is just so we can package an example of a retargeter, because this is a runtime retargeter that runs on the character. So you can see they're lined up there. And that means that when, well, actually, I'll press play. We can see that we now have the Motorica character walking around, but it's using the same underlying animations as everyone else, because you can see the animation profile is NPC male base, exactly the same as this one's animation profile. But the retargeting profile, Manny Motorica, we've got the retargeter there, and if we wanted to use a specific hand pose, we could turn this on and point it to an asset to use for the hands. So those are the ways that you can edit your NPCs, and they're going to be very useful for building out this living world, because you don't want everyone to use the same animations or the same speeds or the same mesh. So adding this variety is what's going to make the world really feel alive. But of course, the variety doesn't exist here in the project yet. We need to create that variety in Motorica and import it into the project. So this is where I'm going to switch over to Motion Factory and show you how to generate one of these data sets. So inside Motorica, the first thing you're going to want to do is go into Motion Factory. So you can see here on the dashboard, we have 3 options: Motion Stage, Motion Factory, and Style Cloning. Style Cloning will be grayed out for you, but Motion Factory is the place you want to be for this part of the workflow. And when we go into Motion Factory, we can go into Custom Trail Sets, as this will be the feature we'll be using. And inside Custom Trail Sets, because we want to make an NPC that only has one gate, then we're going to use the single gate template. So what this template is it's a list of trails, and we call them trails, but you can think of them as paths. And it's going to tell our system which animations you want to generate inside this Motion Factory dataset. So I'm not going to show you the trails right now, because we'll do that later when I show you how you can edit the set. But if we just take the set as is, as provided, the next step will be to select a style. So you can select any style here. Let's say we want, for some reason, we want a zombie NPC walking around our stage or our scene. Then we can choose the zombie style, and we can click preview. So now we have the zombie style here. Then we advance to the next step. And this step is very important, because this is where we set the movement settings and other behaviors that are going to line up with how our character actually moves in game. So the first thing is the speed. Now for a zombie, I might want a bit of a lower speed. So let's go for a 1.1 meters per second walk speed. And note that there's only one speed here because we chose the single gate template there. Next are the movement settings. Now these numbers don't exactly line up with the values that you see in the movement profile inside Unreal Engine. You'll see that we have half-lives, and we have one for velocity and we have one for rotation also inside Unreal, but these don't match up exactly to the values we have on Motorica. But what I can say is the values that we provide as defaults inside the engine, which I believe are 0.3 something something. We can check that in a second. They line up with what I'm about to put here. So 1.2 for the velocity half-life. And this gives us a bit of a slower rotation, because NPCs don't need to turn as tightly or as responsively as a player would. This 0.09 default is very much for a player character. So we tone it down, especially because we're making a zombie, which is going to be quite sluggish anyway. We want to go for a 0.12 velocity half-life there. We'll also increase the braking softness, so the braking isn't so harsh. And the turn behavior will increase the rotation half-life to 0.1, with the same kind of mindset of our NPCs don't need to rotate as quickly as a player character would. Speed damping is going to not be useful here because our characters aren't strafing, so this is a value you can ignore. Duration modifiers, also not very important for this. If you want some longer idles at the tail end of your animations, maybe you want to edit the motion matching system to cut out more of the idle, or you just feel like the idles are too short, then you can bump this up here. And the same for the moving segments of the animation. So all this will do is it will take the animations as they originally were and just scale the moving and idle segments of those animations with this multiplier that you apply here. And we also don't need to use the looping behavior for this, especially for a zombie. We want some of those, non-consistent loops, because that's quite characteristic of the zombie character itself. So we'll click preview and we'll go into the next stage. And this is where we can see all the paths that are going to be in this data set. So for the NPC, we don't need as many animations as we would for a player character. So what we have is arcs, and these are good for situations where the NPC arcs. To be honest, they're few and far between. There's not many situations where the NPC does arc, but just in case it needs to, here is the animation coverage for that. We also have the walk forward loop, very important animation, so we can preview that to see how that looks with this style. Very nice, just a zombie walking forwards there. We have these snakes, and these are often used for avoidance. And because they're used for avoidance, and avoidance is really one of the few unplanned things that happens in this data set, we want to make sure that we have 4 variations. Because when the character needs to do its avoidance, then it could have its right foot on the ground, could have its left foot on the ground, could be halfway through a run cycle, or walk cycle, sorry. We don't know what the pose of the character is going to be when it needs to do this avoidance. So we make sure that we have all of the variations. And you can see just 4 variations of that animation to help with these kind of sidestepping cases where it needs to walk around the character. Similarly for these, we have 70-degree ones, so it's less of a harsh sidestep. But this is just coverage. It's called snakes, but really it's just avoidance animations. Starts, of course, for starting, stops for stopping, and we have stop turns. And these all have 2 variations as well, because again, just to have those nicer transitions when we're coming into these actions. So we can see this 180-degree stop turn. And note how the rotation happens relatively slowly, because we increased that rotation half-life to tone down the rotation speed to give it a more natural zombie walking around NPC kind of feel. We have the stop forward animation, 4 variations on this because it's an animation that happens quite a lot. And again, it's one of the unplanned things, so we just want to make sure that it has the coverage for that. And we also have turns. We have 135 for turning around, 180, well, all the typical angles, but we also have 20 because these are used for the pre-calculated avoidance when 2 NPCs are coming head-on to each other. I'll actually switch to full face cam for this. So 2 NPCs are coming head-on to each other, and then one wants to go this way, one wants to go this way, and then we have this behavior where they need to just do a slight turn to get around each other. So these animations give us coverage for that. So with all this considered, we can go forwards to the next step. You don't really need to do anything here. Oh, and we also have turn in place and idle animations, of course, as we need to. The idle loop, very important. We continue. 92 animations are going to be generated in this set. Oh, sorry, I forgot to switch back to the screen there. So all I was showing was this part. So we have the idle loop and the turn in place, all these animations here. We can then continue. 92 animations are going to be generated. Click generate, and then in a second we're going to get a ping back from the server saying that our animations are on the way. There we go. So I'm going to get an email to the email address that I signed up to Motorica with. So this will be your email, and when you receive the animations, they'll be in a zip file, and that zip file will have the exact same folder structure as you've just seen here in the animation previewer, and then we can go on to use these animations inside Unreal Engine. Now, I did kind of breeze through Motion Factory there without going through all the bells and whistles. You can regenerate animations, you can reseed and things like that. We do have Motion Factory videos that do explain some of that, but if you do need help, then please feel free to reach out. But actually, I'll just quickly go over what you can do there. So we'll go through the same process again. And I'm not going to change any of the settings here, but if we look at an animation and we see that we don't like it, for example, this walk loop is very characteristic. We're not using the zombie style anymore, but if I didn't like it, I could override the seed, change the seed, and go again. So this allows you to regenerate animations if you would like to regenerate them. If you feel like you don't need animations, for example, let's say you just don't want the arcs, you can click the folder, click remove, and remove those. So we fast forwarded about 15 minutes into the future, and we've now got our dataset generated and downloaded. So you'll see on here that we have the dataset, and it's got the same folders. Idle, walking, inside all the walking folders, we have the animations, and inside the idle folder, we have our animations as well. So with these animations, we want to bring them into Unreal, but there's a step before that, which is where we can take advantage of the key idle pose feature that Motorica provides. So the key idle pose feature allows us to specify a specific pose that the animations will always hit when the character is idle. So that's going from idle, for example, idle to run, or going to idle, so run to stop, or a stop turn maybe. Every time we go into that idle state, we're always going to hit that pose. I'll pass through, but hit that pose specifically, and make sure all the animations blend nicely together, which is really important for NPCs, because if it doesn't happen, then you might be looking at an NPC and then suddenly they have a weird kind of animation pop where they just pop into the idle pose, and you don't want that. So that's what this feature provides. So if we go into Motorica, the first thing we want to do is select our style. So we're going to use the same style, the zombie, and I'm going to use the same seed as before as well. So here we have the seed. Exact same seed as what we use for our motion factory dataset. So do note this down, actually. Hopefully you remember which seed you used. And then we can enable the key idle pose feature. So I'm going to hit enable, upload an idle pose, and I'm going to select the idle loop from our dataset. Now you'll see that we have the pose in here in this kind of small render window to show what it looks like. And we have a lot of settings here, but we'll gloss over those settings first and just show how the key idle pose feature works at a base level. So I'm going to make an animation, which is going to stop. Oh, sorry, I chose the wrong preset. Stop turn, 0 degrees, hit animate. And now you'll see in a second after we generated the animation that we're going to hit the key idle pose. So here we have the character going into that idle pose as they come to a stop. But you don't want to be doing this with any root motion. You want to be doing this with the exact same root motions as you have in your motion factory dataset, because the idea is you have your dataset and then you want to regenerate these animations but using key idle pose. So what we can do is in the upload animation window, I'll go back here. So instead of using a preset, we click upload animation. We then go into our data set and then we can pick an animation that we want to regenerate with key idle pose. For example, I'm going to go into you can't see the file picker here because it's just recording the Chrome window, but I'm going into the file picker with the data set that I showed you earlier. I'm going into my stops folder and picking my walk stop. So now I have my walk stop and I can use this exact root motion to generate the exact same animation, but with key idle pose this time. And if I click animate, that will happen. And on the timeline, I'm going to talk about the controls that we have, because you'll see that we have this diamond. This is telling us exactly where that key idle pose is. So if you click the diamond, you'll be taken to the moment where the pose is hit, and the pose is perfectly hit there. But we have these bars as well. So this bar is going to tell you the start of the blend in time, which is decided here. So this number of frames is essentially when the animation will start getting ready to hit the key idle pose. And then the tolerance is going to make the character stay more stringent to that pose. And I'll show you how that works in a bit, because it's maybe not so obvious with a pose that is the same as the style, but I'll show you in a second with a different style. And the settling time is what dictates where this is. So if you want to move this a bit closer, let's say we want to settle after 5 frames, and 10 is the lowest, so we'll actually increase it and go to 20. You can see it shifts everything across. But we'll go with 10, and we'll keep these settings the same. And this is the animation that we have, which is great. It hits the key idle pose. But of course, our stop animation had 4 variations, so we need to generate those 4 variations using phase shift, click animate, and then we'll get those 4 variations. So the idea here is that you would go into motion stage, and then you would generate every single animation that needs to use key idle pose. So that's all your starts and all your stops and stop turns as well, using the feature and also using phase shift to get the number of variations that you needed originally. Once that's done, you can then take those animations and replace the animations inside your folder structure on your computer with the newly generated animations, and then you'll have your kind of key idle pose augmented data set rather than the original data set. And you can see here we have key idle pose, but of course this is with the 4 phase shift variations, so it's working like that. The feature that I told you I was going to mention or show you, was tolerance. So if we go to this, and I'm gonna reduce the tolerance to 0. To naught, all the way to naught. And then I'm going to use a different style. And this might look a bit janky, but this is just to show you how the tolerance feature works. We'll go for combat rifle. And I'm going to go for one variation, hit animate. So this is us using the rifle combat style, but then we're using the zombie key idle pose. So it's going to be a person holding a gun, but then when they get to an idle, they're going to turn into a zombie. So gun, zombie. And because tolerance is very low, we stay as a zombie. But if we go all the way to 1, then you might see a bit more variation, because what tolerance is doing is it's saying that key idle pose, stay really tight with it. 0 tolerance is going to make it pretty much stay exactly the same. And 1 tolerance, it still stays as a zombie, but it has a bit more freedom of movement. You can see the arms are moving around a lot more. So it might be slightly worse of a blend, but it gives you that extra freedom to move. So really just use that feature as you wish. I tend to keep mine at 0.1 for these, because that's a nice value to keep the variation of movement quite low. But anyway, once you're done with an animation, you hit export and you can bring it in. And as I mentioned earlier, just replace all the animations in your data set with the new key idle pose animations. So once we're done with that, now we are ready to bring it back into Unreal. So just to recap, we've gone to Motion Factory and generated our data set. We've then taken that idle pose from the data set, uploaded it into Motion Stage to use the key idle pose feature to regenerate all the stop animations and start animations. And now we've got our new data set to bring into Unreal Engine using our quick import plugin, which I'm going to show you in a second. So we're back in Unreal, ready to get the final parts of the setup complete. And the first step is to import the animations into the project. And we have the plugin for that. So the quick import plugin can be used. We click this button, and then we're going to be asked to locate the folder that we just downloaded from Motorica, or rather the folder that we downloaded and then augmented with our key idle pose animations. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go to Motorica Masters, Living Worlds, Animations, Zombie, and this is the folder that we have. So open that, and now we're going to be asked which folder inside the project we want to put these assets into. I'm going to create a new one under NPC, and I'm just going to call this NPC Zombie. Ignore the case there, NPC Zombie. So we can first retarget the imported animations, because of course we don't want to have them on the Motorica skeleton. And in fact, the NPC base character is using a Manny skeleton, so we do have to retarget to Manny for this process. So what we can do is we can do RTG Motorica Manny. There we go, RTG Motorica Manny. And we can retarget to the Manny skeleton this time that comes with the quick import plugin. We also need to add a suffix to these animations. Well, we don't need to, but we can if we want to make sure that we can tell the difference between the retargeted and the source animations, even though they get put into separate folders. But we'll add a suffix for easy bookkeeping there. And then this step is very important. We need to create the post-search databases, so we don't have to create them ourselves manually and drag animations in. It will just put the animations into the right databases. And the schema we want to use is this one, PSS Manny Advanced NPC. So the one for NPCs, because it has a few different weights which are preferable for NPC cases. With all that set up, we can now import, and we'll get a bar. This first progress bar is just importing the animations as source. Then we're doing the retargeting in batches. And now we are done. So what you'll see is we have 3 folders. The first folder is the source folder, and this contains all the animations on the Motorica skeleton. So very standard there. Inside the retargeted folder, we have the same folder structures, but I can go inside any animation here and see this is our zombie walking forward loop. Of course, the looping animations already have loop enabled because we just want to make it a bit quicker for you there. And we do all the settings for post search with the root motion on the left as well. So that's the looping animation. And then the main folder that is of interest in here is the post search folder. because this folder has the animation databases, PSD idle and PSD walking. And here, I know my face cam is covering it a little bit, but we can see the animations in the dataset all in one go. And this is kind of all the animations that our zombie needs. So this is great. We've got our databases, but now we need to actually assign these databases to profiles that we can use inside our project. So we've got these, and I'm going to hit save, so this might take a second. So we've saved, and now we can go into the NPC folder again. But inside the male and female, you'll see that we have an extra asset. We have this PXT PSD NPC male. It's a bit of a mouthful, but this is a proxy table for choosing post-search databases for the NPC male. That's the naming. So we can copy this into the zombie folder, and we'll use this as our template for our zombie NPC chooser proxy. So we'll replace male with zombie. And in here, we're going to assign the databases. Now, there's only 2 databases to assign because we only chose one gate. So I can search zombie, and you'll see we have the PSD idle, and then we can assign the walking to the PSD walking. Very simple, very nice. Now the next stage is to create a new animation profile. So inside data, we have animation, animation profiles, NPC, and we have these. So I'm going to, again, do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate the male one, copy and duplicate. Then we can go for zombie instead. So a animation profile, NPC zombie. And then we're going to select the zombie proxy table that we just created. I'm going to clear the idle breaks because zombies don't have similar idle break behavior as humans, right? So we don't want to have a standard looking backwards animation. That's not what a zombie would do in an idle break. So we can clear this. Now this is where you can start to get creative because you can bring in your own idle breaks, whether they be from Motorica, whether they be from elsewhere, whether you create them. This is where you can start to give the project a bit of life and a bit of your kind of personal flavor or flair. So I'm going to leave that empty, but you could put whatever idle breaks you want inside there. And with that, I'm going to save this. So this is now our animation profile for the zombie. So we've got 2 pieces out of 3 complete. We've got the post-search databases and the animation import done, animation profile done, but now we need to make a movement profile. So the movement profile can be seen here inside movement profiles. Again, I know my face cam is blocking this a little bit, but you can see movement profile player realistic up here, and I'm clicking that to now go into here. Oh, sorry, no, that's the wrong folder. Apologies. So we want to go to movement profiles, and we've got movement profile NPC simple. Now my face cam is actually blocking this, so I'm just going to move that. 1 second. Move that to the bottom right, just temporarily, so you can see movement profile player NPC symbol up there. This is the one that we use for all of our NPCs. But of course, if you'll remember, we chose to go for a slightly lower walking speed for the zombie. So we're going to duplicate that and make a zombie one and change the walking speed to 110, 1.1 meters per second, as we chose in Motion Factory earlier. Save that, and now we are fully ready. We're ready to go. So we can go back to the map, the NPC arena, and let's pick which person we want to turn into a zombie. I'm going to make this character a zombie. So we click on here, they're patrolling. That's how this NPC is set up. So all we have to do is search profile, change the animation profile to the zombie one, change the movement profile to the zombie one, and then we simulate. And now we've got a zombie walking around in our map. It's that simple. That's the full setup. So you can imagine you can use any data set, or sorry, any style in Motorica. You can use any mesh if you wanted to retarget. You could put it on this person and make it retargeted. So I'll actually do that now. Zombie and retarget Money Motorica, NPC zombie, and you'll see we have a zombie walking around. So, you know, I'm sure your creative juices are flowing, and you can see what you want to do with this template and with this map. I'll leave it there because there's still some other stuff, some hidden nuances, but that's part of the competition to find those out and figure out how you want to make your living world. But hopefully this has served as a good foundation to understand how you can use Motorica plus this project in combination to make your living world for the Motorica Masters competition. So the way this works is you would make your living world, you would then go and click play on ground level and walk around, fly around, however you want to showcase it. You can record the video, send it to us, and then, I haven't switched. I'll switch back. So all I did there was click play, and then you're on ground level. You can walk around, or you can fly around, of course, as you wish, and then record this as a video, send it to us, and that is the submission, along with the project, just so we can maybe go in there and see how you did things and how you set things up. And yes, good luck, and I hope that you have fun with Motorica's tools and this project to make a living world. See you in a bit.